Hello and welcome to the latest installment of the Preemie Parent Alliance and Family Advocacy Network's webinar series. We are so glad that you are here with us today. And we just want to talk to you if you don't know already what this collaboration is. The collaboration really was born between an exciting and just really fruitful relationship between the PPA and the National Perinatal Association. As we look at the many, many issues that face families, we know that these issues are just far too great for any single organization to be able to tackle them on their own or, as individual organizations. There is no way that we can tackle all of them on our own and provide all of the advocacy, all of the support, all of the resources and education that we all need for these families. But together, we can be much more productive and much more effective. So there was just this clear recognition of these synergies between NPA and PPA. And one of the things that we really love about this collaboration is these webinars that have come out of this. And I'm going to pause here just for a quick moment because it looks like we're having just a couple of technical difficulties. Just want to make sure that we get this resolved quickly. Let's see. Okay. All right. I should have my screen showing now. So the NICU staff, the webinar series, again, was born out of this collaboration, and the National Perinatal Association has a family advocacy network. And FAN really champions these collaborative relationships between families and medical professions who care for them. They bring together these family advocates from every arena of maternal infant care. And they share their ideas and cultivate their talents as we address the medical, educational, and psychosocial needs of families. This really is a wonderful arena for those that have a passion for families. And I encourage you, if you're not a member, to contact Erica and become a member. The Preemie Parent Alliance is a network of NICU parent support organizations. And we come from all over the country. We are each led by a parent who has had a NICU or loss experience themselves. And together we represent the needs and the best interests of NICU families in all aspects of healthcare policy, care guidelines, advocacy, education, and family support. One of the most exciting collaborations to come out of this relationship, in addition to the webinar series, is something I wanted to make sure to mention to everybody. And that is a brand new NICU staff education course that was created between the National Perinatal Association, the Preemie Parent Alliance, and Patient and Family Care. It really takes the NPA's recommendations for psychosocial support of NICU families and transforms it into a full course offering for a NICU unit. We had 14 graduate NICU parent leaders from PPA alongside a group of clinical professionals from NPA that have been a part of the creation of this course from the very beginning. So you can go to either the PPA or NPA websites, or you can go to the website that's there on your screen now, www.mynicunetwork.com, to learn more about this 7-module course. So just to get a little housekeeping out of the way, the webinar is being recorded. So if you have to leave us for any reason, it's okay. You will receive a link to the recording within 24 hours of us finishing the webinar. We encourage you to use the questions panel in the chat box to ask questions. My colleague, Crystal Grogan, will be monitoring that box, and will be holding those questions until the end of the webinar, unless there's something that really needs instant clarification, then we may pause during the session as well. We ask that you answer the poll, which we're going to launch in just a little bit. And we've also got a wonderful handout there, an article that our presenter wrote, and we encourage you to download that. And I also want to mention that if you stick around until the very end of the webinar, Casey is going to have a pretty cool offer for you as a giveaway. So be sure to stick around until the very end and learn all about it. So before we begin, let's go ahead and launch that poll, and let's just find out who is with us today. So we've got either graduate NICU parent and support leader, advocate, NICU staff, mental health professionals, graduate NICU parent, or current NICU parent. We'll leave that up there for just a minute so that we can get those statistics in. Looks like about 3/4 of us have responded, so we'll just wait just a little bit longer. All right. Almost everybody has responded, so I think we can go ahead and close that poll. And it looks like, let's see if we can get Erica back with us. She's another colleague of ours representing Family Advocacy Network from NPA, and she'll be able to share the results with us. Hi, Erica.
Hey, Kara. Yeah, no, this is great. This is fantastic. It looks like we really do have pretty much an even split between those who are NICU support parents or in peer support leadership roles, and then NICU staff, including at least half of our NICU staff people or people on the call who are providers are mental health professionals. So I think that's great. That really speaks towards this topic and shows that we are able to offer something that's going to be useful, I think, to both families and staff.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, that is so great to hear. And I just want to thank you all for being with us. And I just want you to let you know that that we really appreciate your commitment to families, whether you have had the experience yourself and are now supporting families, or if you are working in the NICU or are work in another capacity with these families. So it is my absolute pleasure and honor to introduce to you one of the most inspirational women I have probably met in my lifetime. Casey Matthews is the author of Preemie, Lessons in Love, Life, and Motherhood. And if you spend any time on her website and read her bio, you'll find that she is many additional wonderful things in her personal and professional life. But more importantly, I want you to know that Casey has this warmth of spirit that just permeates every sentence she writes and every word she speaks. She is authentic and courageous, which you will learn from hearing a little bit about her story. She is incredibly creative and absolutely loves with her entire soul. I'll never forget when I sat down for the first time to read Preemie shortly after it was published. And it was one of those books that I could not put down. I mean, I was brushing my teeth and reading. I was sitting in carpool line and reading. I was, at the stove stirring a pot of mac and cheese for my kids and reading. I could not stop reading this because as a mom who had preemies, it was the very first time that I read the words of another parent who put into words everything that I felt so deep inside but couldn't express, or I was afraid to express. It really was like she was sitting next to me, holding my hand, and just comforting me with her story. But we aren't here today to talk specifically about Casey's first book. We're here to learn about how we can help NICU moms find their magic. As we all know quite well, having a baby in the NICU is one of the most daunting, confusing, and overwhelming times for mothers. But there is opportunity for learning and discovering strengths, skills, and life lessons that arrive with our baby's birth. So I am so pleased to have Casey with us today to share how NICU parent leaders who have walked this path and the professionals that work alongside them can really share their journeys, where they can guide moms on their own, equip NICU mothers with skills and tools that enable them not just to survive the NICU, but to thrive, which I think is everybody on this webinar today. That is our ultimate goal. So Casey, thank you so much for being with us today.
My goodness, thank you so much, Kira. That was by far one of the most wonderful, heartfelt introductions I've ever received. So my gosh, I am deeply moved, and thank you so deeply. So it is my utmost pleasure to be here, because just what you spoke to, it's not just about surviving, but it's thriving. And I'm so particularly excited about this talk because we are a wonderful audience to come together and discuss this topic, because we've all either walked this path or worked closely with others who have, and we know what worked, what didn't. We know what we wish we'd done differently and what we wished others around us had done differently. And we know the areas where we were well prepared, and then we know the areas where we could have used a lot more help. And each and every one of us has a unique story. But yet, there are so many similarities in all of our stories. And first and foremost, it's that main character of the NICU itself, that we're all in this together. And above all, we are all so linked because we all have that firsthand knowledge and fear of having a vulnerable baby in the NICU and facing an uncertain future. So, in this uncertain world, we all crave certainty. It's one of our deepest primal desires, is to feel that certainty and that safety. But there is never a time in our lives when everything feels more uncertain and out of our control than having a baby or babies in the NICU. So the question is, how can we best help other parents, and in particular for this webinar, NICU moms, that are now walking the same path that we've either guided others on or actually walked ourselves? So throughout the webinar, I'm going to offer a variety of different suggestions, tools, if you will, for you to share with NICU moms that you work with, that come into your life. And some may resonate with you and others may not. And that is totally okay, because I'm really offering a wide variety so you can equip yourself with a bunch of choices, and most importantly, enable yourself to meet each individual mom, each individual NICU mom right where they are, and discover what they need and find out what they're open to. And, many of the tools I offer are very simple and practical, and some lean more toward the profound. But the reason why I believe offering the tools to moms while their babies are still in the NICU is there's this amazing opportunity for moms to begin the process then, while they're in the NICU, of getting more grounded and present and really beginning that healing process while their baby's still in the NICU. So they become more present and available to their babies then, so that as they get more healthy and whole, when their babies come home, which as we all know is when the real work begins, they can show up fully and be present to their baby and help their baby on that same healing journey. So much of what I'll talk about and touch upon today focuses on self-care. And here's why I'm so excited about the opportunity to talk to this group in particular. Because all of us gathered here today are caregivers in some form or another. And as we know, as caregivers, we love to give. But many of us are not really as good at giving to, as good as we are at giving to others, and not as good at receiving in return.
Casey, I just want to jump in here really quick because this is something that I remember from myself and that I see with, so many of the wonderful members we have throughout PPA and NPA and other caregivers that work in the NICU. Why is that the case for caregivers? Why are we so great at giving, but not so great at receiving?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think it has a lot to do with vulnerability. So, when we're giving, we are the ones in control. When we're receiving, we're not in control, and we have to open ourselves up, and we have to be vulnerable, and we have to really be on the other end of control. And for so many of us, that's a scary place. And many of us don't feel comfortable being there. But I kind of feel like here's the deal. If we're always on the giving end, and no matter how much you love to give, no matter what, it really does eventually start to build up resentment and eventually dry up your well because, we all have a limited capacity and amount we can give. And at some point, we have to receive in return. And, oftentimes the first and easiest place to start receiving is actually from yourself. And it starts really by like changing your own habits and modeling that for others. So does that make sense? Resonate with you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's so clear that just the constant giving, no matter how much we feel like it helps us heal or we feel like it feeds our soul, you're right. It's just not sustainable. And I love what you just said about, having to learn to receive from ourselves. Thank you so much. I love that.
I think it speaks a lot to this notion of strength and weakness. And when we, need help from others, we're putting ourselves like, oh, I'm not strong enough. I'm weak that I have to receive. When, what part of my big lesson in learning was really that, strength and vulnerability, are coiled around each other. And oftentimes when you're at your most vulnerable self, you are actually at your greatest strength. And that, I think is a lot of us, as whether we're a NICU mom or just a mom in general, that's a big lesson for us, allowing others to help us and without feeling weak, but it's showing that we're actually strong by letting others help.
I love that. Thank you.
So everything that I'm offering today for all of us on the call to share with NICU moms is really meant for all of us too, because as caregivers, there's this beautiful opportunity here today for all of you to take away what resonates with you and put it into your own practice. And the practice of giving to yourself first before you give to others. So then not only will you be feeding your own soul, but you'll be modeling these practices to the NICU moms you work with. And by caring for yourself first, you will have so much more to give away in the way of helping other moms. And then, of course, your own family and all of those in your life that you love. And I feel so strongly and believe that the act of self-care is so profound, and it's like ripples on the pond. And when you take care of yourself, it's like dropping that stone right into the pond. You're at the center of your circle. And then all the ripples that come out from that touch others. So that's my mission, is to get all of us to care for ourselves first so that we can best show up for others. So I'd love with all of that to get started in the way that I begin all my talks and my coaching sessions, and that is with a centering, connecting meditation. And I like to begin this way because it just gives us a few moments to come together as a group and get centered and connected. So what I'd ask you to do is just simply put both feet on the floor and have either your hands in your lap with your palms up or your hand over your heart. And if you're in a place where you're able to do so, just allow your eyes to close. And then just take in a few deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. And feel yourself ground into your chair. Breathe deep down into your belly. If you want to audibly let out, just breathe that air back out. Breathe into your hips. Feel your heart open. Feel your heart connecting in the sacred circle that has come together today. And let us leave behind all the moments leading up to this one and all the moments that will follow after. And let us invite in all our angels and our guides and any divine knowledge we are meant to know and receive so that we may use it for others and all of those in our life that we are meant to help. So just let that sink in and just let yourself be here in this here and now. Take a couple more deep breaths. Feel your cells opening up. Feel yourself sink more deeply into your chair. And as you feel ready, just slowly, if your eyes were closed, open them back up. And just notice how you feel. That took less than a minute, but notice if you feel more present in your body. Notice if you're breathing a little more deeply. And see what else you notice. Do you feel more focused or centered? And there are no right or wrong answers here. What's important to note here is that took less than a minute to ground yourself, to come into your body, to feel those changes. And as we all know, the biggest constraint on NICU moms, or all moms for that matter, is time. But that literally took us less than a minute. So keep that in mind as we move through this time together, and notice when and where you feel your resistance popping up. And when you feel resistance, you can ground back into your chair, put your feet on the floor, take in a nice deep breath. And this is a wonderful tool to have for yourself, whether it's before you go into a NICU setting, whether, before you walk into the hospital, sit in your car and take a moment. This is a great tool to teach NICU moms before they go in. It's just opening yourself and grounding yourself. And then, when you are there and you feel that resistance popping up and you say, I don't have the time for that, or there's no way that NICU moms I work with would have the time for that. Notice that it really doesn't take that much time. And the thing is, what we focus our time on is a choice. And sometimes it's really a matter of broadening our choices. Excuse me. Or even knowing that choices are available.
You really hit that right on the head, Casey. In knowing that the choices are available, I think back to my days in the NICU, and my brain was so full of numbers and settings and things about my daughters that if somebody said to me, what could you do to take care of yourself? I would probably just draw a blank, or people may think, self-care, I don't have time to get a massage or mani-pedi, but that's really not what you're talking about here. So I love that you've made that point, Casey, that we're all here as support parents and support professionals to offer the choices and to offer the options. And, providing those choices is just critical.
You are so spot on. Hang on one sec. I'm going to get a sip of water, see if I can clear this fog in my throat.
Certainly. Yeah, take care of yourself.
Okay, I think I did. I allowed myself maybe to get a little too too comfortable, and my throat relaxed too much because all of a sudden it just stopped talking. Oh my goodness! But I heard everything you said. I put my earphones in the wrong ear. Hang on. I heard everything you said, and I love so much that you've distinguished what I mean by self-care, because I think a lot of people hear self-care and they think about massages or manicures or pedicures. And you're spot on. That is not at all what I'm talking about. If that is something that feeds your soul, then, and you've got the time, have at it. Go get one. But when I talk about self-care, I'm talking about how we speak to ourselves. Like that we speak so oftenly and without consciousness in such a negative way to ourselves. We know all the guilt and the trauma that comes from NICU moms, and is when we walk in there and thinking, oh my God, I'm not good enough. What did I do that I failed this baby? And speaking in that way with all this, this negative self-talk. And self-care is about turning that around and speaking to ourselves like we would to a child we love. And I remember when this really hit home for me, maybe 10, 15 years ago. I was in a yoga class, and the yoga teacher ended by saying, and please don't beat yourself up. There's already enough pain and suffering in the world. And I just love that. And I thought, what an exquisite act of self-care, just to speak kindly to yourself. And, and then other ideas of like, we're always saying yes to everybody, but, practicing getting in the habit of saying no when something doesn't feel right to you, or it's already too much, or, setting boundaries with others, that is an act of self-care, and protecting yourself from others who get caught up in drama or negativity. And then, I'll get more into this, but thinking about how are you nurturing your physical body? Our body is made up of 60% water, and energy moves freely through water. But when we're dehydrated, it doesn't flow freely. And becoming mindful of the foods that we're nourishing ourselves, and movement. One of my greatest acts of self-care is taking a walk. And even if it's just for 5 minutes, and then just like we did at the beginning, sitting quietly for a few moments, just to get centered, intentional. So that's, Kara, what I'm talking about when I say self-care. So, and I don't know if you've got thoughts you'd love to add to that, but that's what I'm talking about today. It's really this more mindful, intentional consciousness we bring in how we care for ourselves.
I love it. Absolutely. I just couldn't agree more, especially with that changing the way that we talk to ourselves, because, man, are we good at the negative self-talk.
Right. So think about little Kira as a 6, 7, 8-year-old, and think about sometimes when you get down on yourself, would you ever dare say to the things to her that we as adults say to ourselves? Never. So it's about, being mindful when that happens and catching yourself and just changing that habit.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's another big resistance?
It comes right up the minute you talk about self-care, even in this aspect of just these little small habits. I think what always moms first bump up against time. I don't have the time. But then it's always this idea of like, but that's so selfish to take time for myself. And, all of us as moms experience this, but especially NICU moms who want to spend every waking moment they possibly can spare with their baby. But here's the thing, it's sort of this idea of quality versus quantity. What you can really assure NICU moms is that by taking those extra few moments throughout their day for themselves to refill their very depleted well, will allow them to show up so much more grounded and present and available to their baby. So it just feels like even if we don't have a baby in the NICU, this applies to all of us. That when we take these really valuable moments for ourselves, it allows us to show up in the fullness of ourselves. And then, challenges come at us no matter what, all day long. But being in this grounded, present, certain state really enables us to handle whatever the day and life has in store for us. So I think it's a really, really wonderful practice and habits to start shifting toward and becoming aware of. And that's my whole thing about magic, because that's where we find the magic. And magic comes out of gratitude. And when we're overwhelmed and scared and exhausted, it's really difficult to feel grateful for just about anything.
Oh, absolutely. And can you explain what you mean by the magic? I mean, the word itself just conjures up kind of, mystical and beautiful imagery. But what do you mean by that when you say find our magic?
I mean more like it's like you're being guided and supported. You're not efforting as much, and it's almost like you've put on a new pair of glasses and you're shifting your perspective on how you see the world. Like so for a NICU mom, that shift may look like looking at those beeping alarms with this disdain of won't those alarms ever shut up? And instead shifting that thinking to bless you, dear alarms, and how lucky are we to have this advanced medical care letting us know that my baby may need assistance. And this is for anyone who works for a NICU mom on that day when you show up and you think, oh no, how did I get stuck with this crabby mom again? And shifting that. It's like turn that thinking on its head and looking through the new perspective and new eyes and think, okay, what am I meant to learn from this mom today? And how can I meet her where she is? And how can I better know and understand just how fearful and vulnerable she feels? So that's what I mean. That's where the magic is. It's in those connections and the gratitude. Because when we look at the world from that perspective, when we change our habits, pretty soon we don't have to work at it. And it becomes so much more of who we are. It's a lifestyle change, really. And we're not efforting in the same way. And life steps up to support us. And things become easier and we live more in the flow of life. How does that all sound? And does that resonate with you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, just that thought of, change, again, we're kind of changing the dialogue, right? We're changing, how we're perceiving someone that we're working with that day, looking at that as how can I learn from that person? Probably not our first thought when we know we're going into a difficult situation, but it certainly changes your perspective, and that's everything.
It does, and it's and it plays out in all aspects of your life, because when you feed your own soul and you show up in the fullness of you, you greet the parking attendant differently. You greet the gal at the coffee shop differently. It plays out in a very broad way. So I would love to share with you some of the easy tools that you can incorporate in your day and then teach others to do the same. Because like I was saying, it's when we show up as our best self, that energy ripples out and it really will impact others, and so on and so on and so on. So how does that sound? Shall I start there?
Absolutely. Let's dive right in.
Great. So, and I love, I always sort of think in terms of metaphor. And when I think about how we care for ourselves, I often use the metaphor of like building a house. And, before we build a house, you have to have a strong foundation. And I always think of the physical body as really that foundation. Our bodies are, our vessels that carry us around all day, and we need them to be strong. And I already spoke about it before, but, water, like the consciousness of water. And it's such a simple thing to grab, a jug of water that has a screw cap and leave it behind the driver's seat and carry a water bottle around with you and you pour water in before you head into the NICU, and then, pour another bottle full when you leave, or, put a case of bottles in the back of the car. And, I think in terms of, that grab and go kind of food, and it's always sort of like what's available, and it's usually sugary and things that really aren't supporting our long-term health. And, just like it gets the adrenals going short term, but it's long-term burnout. So, having a bag of apples, in the back of the car, or, individual bags of nuts that are protein rich, those are things that, if those are taken care of ahead of time, and we just bring consciousness in, I'm going to take care of this, I'm going to load these up in the car. Or even better, it's a wonderful opportunity for NICU moms to practice asking for help or receiving help that's being offered. And I remember so many people ask me, is there anything I can do? What can I do to help? And, you spoke about it earlier, Kira, that idea of choice. And you don't even know what the choices are because you're in pure overwhelm. And when all these people say, what can I do to help you? You don't know. You don't have an answer. So literally saying, oh my gosh, a case of bottled water for the back of my car would be amazing. Or, some individual snack bags of trail mix. Like, thank you. That would help me so much. So those are like really practical and simple, but they have a profound effect on how you move about your days just by being hydrated and nourished. So that's simple, easy. But speaking about this asking for help and receiving help, I want to share my own story of learning to receive from when our daughter Andy was in the NICU. And I really like to share a story because I really believe that we remember things so much more when we learn through story rather than information. So I'm actually modeling this to you in this case. So, you can tell NICU moms all day long that they should really let others help and receive from them. Or you can show them that with one of your own stories. And that will really, they'll remember the story. They're not going to remember the information. Or you're even welcome to take mine and share. I know this other NICU mom who had this story about opening up and learning to receive. So my particular story, when our daughter Andy, she'd been in the hospital for a month, and all these people in town had rallied around us, and they'd created this calendar where people were bringing us meals every night, and they were elaborate. And my husband and I kept thinking, oh my word, how are we ever going to pay them back? I mean, it was just so much, and we felt so indebted to them. And there was one family in particular who had brought us 3 meals, and the last one was Thai takeout from this amazing restaurant, and they had spent so much money on this gorgeous meal. And I just thought, oh my word, I just don't know how to even say thank you, or is thank you enough? And so about a week after they delivered that meal, it was Christmas Eve. And of course, Andy's in the hospital and we're not there with her. And we've gone to the service up the road, and we're standing, there's a lot of people gathered out front, and our son Tucker's climbing in the creche, and he's on the donkey, and I'm trying to get him off. And this mom who brought all these meals walks up to me. And I thought, as soon as she's walking over, I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, what am I going to say? I need to thank her. I need to profusely, like, all that she's done for us. And before I could get any of that out, she came over and she said, I want to thank you. And I was like, wait, what? What are you thanking me for? You're the one who's done all these things for me. And she said, I just want to thank you for opening yourself up and allowing us to be part of this journey with your daughter in the NICU. And I was just so blown away by that moment. And it just completely turned the whole concept of giving and receiving on its head for me. And I learned in that moment that the act of receiving is actually giving in return. And that it's something we all really need to remember, that we all want to show up as supermom and make it all look so easy. But all we end up doing is just kind of keeping that hidden and draining our own well. And so I learned in that moment that if others are offering to help, it's really an opportunity to consider the habit of saying no and opening up to the possibility of receiving help and saying yes, or, even taking that incredible step further that is so difficult for many of us as caregivers, is to actually ask others for help. So that's another biggie. That's my big one of so many lessons came out of having my daughter so prematurely in the NICU for so long, but that was a real biggie for me, and I'd love for you to take that with you and, think about your time and all the women that you've worked with, and ponder that a little bit. So so I don't want to overwhelm you, Kira, but I was going to move on to my next tool, and if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. So
this is one of my favorites, by the
I'm
way.
glad. It came out of what it is. It's a daily planner, and it's a time management tool I created for myself because I felt like my day was spinning in circles. And I think all of us can relate to the feelings of overwhelm, of just feeling like you have a to-do list as long as your arm, and you get a couple things done a day, if any, and you go to bed feeling like you accomplished nothing. And I thought there had to be a better way. And I searched for it and I couldn't find it. So I created this. And it's really become my favorite tool. And it's a daily practice. I do it every morning. I love it. I want to share it with everybody. And it's free on my website. So you can just head over there. It's caseymatthews.com and download your own copy. And I'm not going to go into it in too much detail because it comes with a set of instructions of how to use it. But what really is more important to know is what you get out of it is, that you'll feel like you can better manage your days, and you'll feel more productive and grounded.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to just jump in again and just encourage those on the webinar to really take a look at this. It may seem at first like, oh my gosh, how am I supposed to do that every day? But it doesn't take all that much time. And as my mentor said, because she has me doing a practice very similar to this, just getting all of the stuff that's in your brain out clears up space for your brain to actually work and function and help you to think more clearly throughout your day. And it's been completely transformational for me.
Oh, I love that, Kira. And what you've done, I love, is that you've figured out a way which works best for you. And, so check out the daily planner. It may really resonate with you. It's basically, taking your big long to-do list and compartmentalizing it. But the most important part of it, as you'll see on the slide, is that top left-hand box is you're actually putting down what will you do for your soul today. And that's the key component to this and my 3 keys, every day I have to drink a lot of water, and I put that on there, and I have to move my body. So that's my walk, and I have to meditate. And when I say meditate, a lot of people roll their eyes and go, okay, on my yoga mat in lotus position. I literally do not mean that at all. I mean what we did at the beginning of this call. I will sit both feet on the floor on the most comfortable couch in the house, and I might put on a nice piece of classical music, and I'll sit for a few minutes. Sometimes when I have a little more time, I'll set the timer on my phone and just lean back and give myself 5-10 minutes if I have it. And it really grounds me and clears me. So I encourage you to check that out. And what I love about the daily planner is what you're talking about is it's like you're not carrying all this around in your brain. The page is holding it for you, and the importance of writing. It's wonderful, and it's an opportunity for NICU moms to start creating a habit of planning and doing a few things for their own soul while their baby is in the hospital, so that they can create that habit before the baby is actually at home. And then once the baby is at home, the whole family benefits from this. And there's other simple little tools like, planning ahead for inspirational, uplifting podcast or playlist for the car, thinking like kind of in terms of the 5 senses, what, maybe aromatherapy in the car, and, so what you're seeing, what you're hearing. So anyway, it's the wonderful thing is the service box is the work you do outside of the home, and that can be adapted to change in any way. And one thing I want to say just quickly here and note is, in my experience with all the NICU moms that I've worked with, they're often so eager to help others and to give back and help others as soon as they're home. And I felt that same way. I was so grateful to everyone in the NICU, and I wanted so much to help the other NICU moms. And one of Andy's primary nurses, she said to me when I was saying, "We'll be back. I'll come in. I'll help. I'll distribute. I'll do this." And she said, "No, go home and take care of you and your baby." She said, "There's plenty of time for that later. You need to focus on your own healing." And I always think of, like, when the oxygen mask falls down in the plane, you need to breathe for yourself first. So that was some of the best advice I was given. And I just want to share that here, that, for those of us who, have the NICU moms who are so desperate to, how can they give back? Just giving them permission to say, there's plenty of time for that, taking time for yourself. So, and back to the daily planner, the lower left block box where it says family and home. This is all the things you do throughout your days for everybody else in your life, and taking care of family and home and doing the laundry and loading the dishes. And what I love so much about it is, if you take time and plan for your soul and do those things as much as you can first, those real almost mindless, putting the laundry and emptying the dishwasher, you can do it just with more presence and, lack of resentment, because you've already taken care of yourself and fed your well, so to speak. So, and then the last box I really want to just take a moment to focus on is where it says intentions. And what I love about this, it's very similar, Kira, to what your mentor has you doing. Just put it all down on the page. And as moms, whether we have a baby in the NICU or not, when we signed on to have children, we signed on to really be lifetime warriors. And we all have it sort of on a sliding scale of how much we worry. But I was worrying so much that I found it was like really interfering with my life. And this was, again, like, there has to be a better way. So this is my better way. This is where, in the intention box, I take my worries and I flip them on their head. So, for example, if I'm so worried that my daughter, she's been studying all week for this math test, and she's so scared. Instead of saying, "I'm so worried about my daughter and her math test," I flip it on its head and I say, "I'm so happy and grateful that my daughter's math test went well," and just intending it as if it's already happened in a positive way. And it doesn't always, but that's not the point. The point is that I wasn't carrying all this worry around and having it interfere with my day. I was just open to turning that on its head. So it's another habit, and that's what we're all doing here. And so if any of that sounds like something that resonates with you with the daily planner, try it out, adapt it in any way that works for you, come up with your own daily planner. But creating the habit of doing this, it will be really helpful. And grab it soon, because my publisher's talking about adding it to my next book, so it doesn't have to come off as being on my website. So, Kira, I have just some other last tools I wanted to share, if that's okay, and go through a list.
Oh,
these are just things that
absolutely.
helped me. At health food stores, you can find something called Rescue Remedy. It's a flower essence. It's very calming. There are essential oils. I found, I learned and trained in Reiki, which was really like igniting the healing in my own hands. It built so much confidence in me. And I know within a lot of hospital settings, there are a lot of Reiki volunteers. So encouraging NICU moms, or you as caregivers in the NICU, to look into that and receive Reiki. It's like the putting back of life force energy into your body. Another tool that, a lot of you may already know this, but it was so super helpful for me, is having books at my daughter's bedside in the NICU that I could read to her. And it was just a way of connecting with her. We read stories into a tape recorder and left those in her isolette so that the nurses could play. It was my son and I reading them when we weren't there, she'd hear us reading the stories, and it eased some of that time that I was away from her. And then I'd encourage, NICU moms to have either a journal at home or at their baby's bedside. And there's a lot of opportunity through writing, where you can encourage moms to think about, writing a letter to their baby. What are all the things they want to say to their baby? And, or they can make a simple list of, what are all the things you want to do someday with your baby? Write all those things down. When I did this, it's, eating chocolate ice cream cones and seeing it dripping down my daughter's hands. You can offer the idea of recreating your truth, like the story of how you wish your birth had really gone. Write it as if it had gone the way you want it to be. So these are a lot of ways to connect with NICU moms and ways to find a way in. And, it's a way of allowing them to bring their fears to light, make a list. What are all the things you're afraid of? And it's like brings that out of the dark, brings those fears to light. So that's, there's lots I'm giving you and throwing at you, but those are some of my favorites.
And I love what you just said again about bringing your fears to light. I watched your Facebook Live that you posted not too long ago. And when you talked about inviting your fears in, acknowledging them and shining a light on them, it was like they lose their power over you, once you bring them out of the darkness.
That's exactly right. And it's such an important tool because as NICU moms, like we lose a lot of our power. And we lose our power because we have little control over the care of our child when it comes to all the medical stuff. But more importantly, I think we lose so much of our power to fear. And, fear is really sneaky. We don't really know it. And it often lives like right below the surface of our skin, but we don't even know that it's like infusing and directing so much of our day. So, by acknowledging it, like, I see you, fear, sit next to me and let's have a cup of tea. Let's bring you to light. And I'm going to take away your power. So, yes,
Right.
Thank you for acknowledging that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, it sounds so simple, but it really has been very transformational in my own life. That was a practice that I had to learn in my own healing as well. And just so glad that you pointed that out, that you shared that.
I love that. And I love those writing exercises I offered. Though they're also questions that, it doesn't have to be a writing exercise. It can just be questions that you use to initiate conversation with NICU moms to get them to open up. And I think so much of one of the best things that we really can do as NICU care providers is to just simply show up and listen, and really listen to their story and, listen to how they had intended this birth to go. And, in those instances, really resisting the urge to share your story when they're sharing yours, and just simply use that as a time to ask clarifying questions or ask questions that may continue to bring their fears and story to light. Because like we talked about, one of the biggest fears I learned is that keeping those thoughts and fears and stories hidden in the dark only causes them to breathe and grow stronger. So that's what we really want to do. We want to help NICU moms bring their stories, and with their stories, the fear to light. So, you may want to create a list of questions, just, that maybe you like have it in your notes section on your phone of, asking, just things that you have, or, if it doesn't come necessarily naturally, ways that you can help them to open up. So, and I do want to I spoke about writing a little bit before, and I just want to make a quick note here that I'm a writer. I've written all my life. And you may find this interesting that when my daughter Andy was in the hospital, I never wrote much at all. And it was just, I couldn't. It was like everything was so overwhelming and too much, and I just wasn't ready. So always be mindful about meeting moms where they are. And you can simply offer the tools, but be conscious of what resonates with them and what doesn't. I didn't start writing my book Preemie until my daughter had turned 7. And that was the first time I started writing about that experience. So, that's something I just wanted to make note of. And one other thing I wanted to speak about was this idea of permission. Um, and this isn't for all, but this spoke a lot for me, is when I was coming into the NICU every day, I was just looking for someone to guide me and just someone to just tell me what to do. And one of the greatest gifts that another one of Andy's primary nurses gave me is she told me to take a day off. And not only did she tell me to take a day off, but she assured me, she said, "We will love her when you can't be here." And it was such a huge gift for me. And I remember it was a Thursday, and Tucker and I stayed in our pajamas all day, and I sat on our front porch and read a little bit of a book while he was asleep. And it was this like incredible nurturing gift. And from that on, I ended up taking every single Thursday off while Andy was in the NICU. And it fed my soul, and it allowed me, when I walked back in there on Friday, I had so much more to give. So I just want to encourage you, thinking about, these women are looking to be guided and they're looking for permission. Not all of them, but many of them. So think outside of the box, and just remember, there is never, obviously, a more challenging time for moms than having a baby in the NICU. And we know they're uncertain, they're scared, uh, overwhelmed, exhausted. But if you can help them to implement even just a couple of the tools I offered today, those small, simple steps can help them on the path of healing from all that trauma associated with having a baby in the NICU, and allow them to show up fully for their baby so their baby can heal too. And, I challenge all of you, this is your chance to walk your talk and apply practicing all these tools in your life, and watch the ripples that positively affect your loved ones as we, really show up as our best selves and guide others to do the same. So I think, I've given you what I've got, and I'd love to, hear your thoughts, Kira, or anybody else, but
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what I love about everything that you have shared with us today, is that everything is a simple, practical idea that we can incorporate and that we can encourage moms. I think sometimes we might be looking for a profound answer to, change the lives of those that we're working with. And it really is kind of adding up these simple tools that will help them not just in the NICU, but all the way through their lives. It's really, that's when it becomes profound. And that is when you see those ripples, as you mentioned. So we've got just a few minutes left, and we did have a couple of questions that came through during registration. So, Crystal, are you with us? Can you let us know what those questions were?
I am. One question was, Casey, was there a NICU psychologist available to you? And if not, would it have been helpful?
There wasn't. There wasn't at all. And it would have been the most helpful thing ever for me. And I write about in my book, I spent the first few days after Andy was born thinking she was the smallest baby that had ever been born. It wasn't until I said it out loud to a NICU nurse, "Have you ever seen a baby this small?" And she said, "Oh, honey, this floor is full of babies this small." And I was like, what? And that is just, a simple example, but I'm not exaggerating when I say hundreds of them where those needs could have been met if that provider had been there for me. I would have loved that, and I would love that for everyone else.
Yes, and that is actually one of the recommendations in the NPA's recommendations for the psychosocial support of NICU families, and it's also a part of the course, is the mental health professional and what a critical role they should be playing in every NICU, in my opinion, and I think that opinion is shared with many here as well. I think there was another question as well, Crystal, wasn't there?
Yes, I actually have two more. I have
okay.
someone on now that had stated, helping parents by suggesting they get control of what they can control when there's so much they cannot control. Simple things like they control taking a longer shower, spending some time making their own meals, and not one just given to them. Actually makes them feel, more normal for a moment. And the breaks from the NICU are very important, but sadly, most parents that they support in the NICU do not come to the NICU. So empowering those that aren't there is a whole different story.
It really is. It really is. And I think the only thing I would speak to that is if there's ever a way to connect and find out why they're not coming to the NICU. And part of the reason why I wrote my book is I showed up at that NICU every day with a smile on my face, and it was the last place in the world I wanted to be. And I thought I was the worst mother in the world, and something was deeply inherently wrong with me. And it wasn't until I started writing this book and stood up and spoke my truth and shared it with other mothers and said it out loud that, I didn't want to be there and I didn't want this baby. And, daring to speak it out loud and hearing other moms say, I felt the same way, which just brought me so much relief. So trying to connect and find out the why is sometimes, the only way that you can really offer any assistance there.
And what is one thing that what one thing did a preemie parent say to you that gave you hope?
When Andy was in the NICU, this was well before Facebook and all these other groups to connect with. And with all the HIPAA rules, I didn't connect with any preemie parents while I was in the NICU. And we were an hour away, and the support group met at 7 at night, and I certainly wasn't going to go back in when I'd been there in the day. So honestly, I can say I didn't have that experience. And that is also part of why I wrote this book, because I was so desperate for hope, and I was so desperate for someone to give me this hope. And besides standing, wearing the floor beneath me out, of standing and looking at the NICU graduates, photos of them and how well they were doing, I didn't have that connection with other parents. And I felt like I really missed out. And that's one of the big reasons why I wrote the book, is like I almost wrote it for the mom I had been without those connections. So
Wow.
Yeah.
And, I of course spoke about the book your first book at the beginning of the webinar, and I hear you have another book coming out in a few months. Can you share anything about that with us?
I'm really excited about it. It's really fun. It's very different than preemie in that it's not really a memoir, but it's more of like a guidebook, a gift book, and it takes almost like a lot of the lessons I've learned, and it's moving almost like to this next level. And it's called The Mom's Guide to Creating a Magical Life: 8 Practical Steps to Feel Happier, Inspired, and More Relaxed, and touches on a lot of what we talked about today, but kind of takes it all to the next level. So thank you for asking.
Yes. Well, we will be sure to announce the release of that book through our channels, because I can't wait to get my copy.
Thank you.
So I do want to make sure that everybody knows how to get in touch with you. So we've got all of Casey's contact information here on the slide. And, I noticed something else on your website that might be interesting to those that are on the webinar with us, and those moms that are being supported, is you have a workshop, I noticed, that's entitled Ignite Your Magical Life, Become a Happier Mom.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I love this. It really, I touched on it in our talk, really, the foundational building of your metaphor of the home, but it's really looking in this workshop, we really dive into the physical body, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual. We really get into more intuitive stuff. But again, like I showed you today, it's all very practical stuff that leads to really profound changes. So people love it. People really, really love it.
Yeah.
So that's available on my website too.
I think I'll be signing up for that.
Oh, I'm glad.
So before we end our time together, I do want to share with anybody all the contact information for Preemie Parent Alliance and for the National Perinatal Association. Make sure, if you aren't already, by registering for this webinar, you are now on that future newsletter list, where we will share details about our future webinars and events. And we're getting really close to that special offer from Casey. So just bear with me through two more announcements. The first is that we'll have registration opening very soon for the 2018 Preemie Parent Summit that will be later this year at the end of September. So be looking for that announcement, and you can keep checking our website as well. NPA just had their 2018 conference, which was very successful, and they've already got that date and location set for next year. So something else to put on your calendar as you are planning ahead. And so with that, I just want to say a thank you to Casey for spending this hour with us. And thank you to all of you for the work that you do every day to support and empower NICU parents. And as a thank you, Casey has that special offer for you. So
yeah, so
what can they?
I work as a transformational life coach and really helping people to ground into this work. And so much can be done in a 30-minute session. And I'd love to offer each and every one of you a complimentary session. And not only that, you know, my passion is working with preemie moms, not just preemie moms, NICU moms, moms with babies in the NICU. So I would invite you to extend this offer to the moms that you work with. And you can pass my name on that way. My coaching is all done remotely over video. So I'm in New Hampshire, but I work with people all over the country and even the world. So you can actually sign up for a slot directly on my contact page, which is on my website, which is caseymatthews.com, or you can email me at casey@caseymatthews.com, and we'll set up that half-hour time to get together and see what we
Wonderful.
can do. Yeah, it's my pleasure.
That is so generous. Thank you so much, Casey. And thank you everyone for being with us. And we just wish you a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you so much, Kira.